Hey guys, welcome to another painting tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be taking you through the sketch phase and placing down color in a painting. Then in the next one, we'll do more detailing and finishing up. This is going to kind of work like my walkthroughs that I do, except that this will be done in real time. Just a disclaimer, I am using a tablet. You don't have to have a tablet, it just makes things a lot easier. You can still create great works of art with just a mouse and a bit of patience. You know when you were little and you would draw a landscape, you draw, say, a single mountain, a sun with sunglasses on, and maybe a tree here and there. So we're going to kind of do that, except we're going to make it a little bit nicer than when you did it as a kid. And to start out, I'm just going to kind of sketch what I want. You don't have to spend very long on a sketch. It can just be something to kind of get you pointed in the right direction. So what I like to do when I do initial sketching is I set the canvas to about 50% gray, and this just makes it easier on the eyes than pure white, just having a nice neutral color. And I'll come down here, click on new layer, and I'll just name this sketch. And I'll hit D to reset my colors to black and white. I'm going to bring up my brushes, and I've gone ahead and I've just made a few presets. If you watch my last tutorial, you'll see most of these, just the same thing that I did. So I'm just going to take this basic brush here. Next I'm going to come in, I'm just going to start sketching along. Maybe I'll have the mountain, somewhere around here, just kind of loosely sketching in. And I kind of want it to be a nice, tall mountain that just kind of pierces the horizon. Maybe there'll be some smaller ones in the back, just to kind of add something back there. I'm going to make this a bit smaller. I'm going to hit Control T, bring up my transform, bring it back, and then push it up just slightly. And finish that out. And then maybe leading up to the mountain, I'll have some trees, a little forest. Just kind of implying that there's something here. I'm not trying to do any detailing at this point. And just very quick strokes with my pen on the tablet. And, some more mountains over here. And maybe it'll go out into plains and just kind of fade off into the distance. And maybe have a little mountain coming in here. So you have this nice space where it just kind of goes off into the distance. And clouds, I'll just kind of imply some stuff for now. And some more trees here, and maybe there's some rolling plains here. And there might be some brush and trees along here. You can always add a lake in here. Lake at the foot of the mountain, and then it'll come closer to you as the viewer. And the shoreline will just come right up to you. Maybe spread it out a little bit more. Now, don't be afraid about making your sketch messy, because this isn't going to be part of your final painting at all. And there could be some little plants here, little wildlife. Since this is a lot closer to you, you can kind of show the scale of what you're working on by adding foliage to the foreground. Then perhaps there's, say, a tree branch kind of popping into the canvas. And that's something to think about when you are painting a scene. Think about, is there something off to the side of the painting that you might not see. Say an object casting a shadow, or there's some foliage coming off from the side, or anything you can think of. Just to help really sell that this is more than just a canvas with paint on it. Try to create this idea that there is an actual world that you're looking at. Quickly sketch in some leaves. Those are some awesome looking leaves. Well, just to help break up the foreground. Now, we're not going to do the sun with sunglasses. You can always add it if you really, really want to. But I'm just going to imply that my light source is up in the corner here, so light's going to come in, kind of hit the side of the mountain, and brighten this edge here and over here. And maybe some more little plants over here. And I think that works for the sketch. Some snow up here that comes down the mountain. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to take the opacity and bring it down to about something really light. 10% usually works, at least at the start. And I'm just going to name this sky plate. And this will just kind of serve as the initial sky for our painting. And getting the sky done first really helps you with your overall color scheme, because so much of your painting will initially sample off the sky. So I'll do that, and then we're just going to do a daytime scene to start with, since it's the easiest. I'm just going to take a nice blue color, and then I'll hit Alt Backspace and fill my canvas. Next, I'm going to grab my big fluffy brush, very soft brush. I'm just going to sample off the sky, and then I'm going to bring this over, make it slightly brighter, and take a lot of the saturation out of it. Because as you get closer to the horizon, there's going to be a lot more atmosphere, and it's going to turn things grayer and brighter. Because you're looking through so much more dust, so much more atmosphere. That's part of why the sky seems to turn orange when the sun sets on the horizon, because the light is coming through so much more. There's a lot of refraction. And I'll just hold shift and kind of drag this over. And I think I need to turn flow on. There we go. Perhaps it's a little too gray to start. Just come to the horizon. Brighten this up. There we go. That works for now. I'm going to come up to the sky, because the sky does shift in its color as it goes. I'm just going to make my brush nice and big. Kind of darken up this initial. And this is a little too gray for me, so I'm going to go back over that. That looks decent. Just fill in the bottom a little. And now I'm going to set up my light source. So I'm going to hit Q and bring up my quick mask. And I'm going to hit G and switch to gradient and select this radio gradient. I'm just going to come up in the corner and kind of drag out. And you can kind of see it makes this highlight. And I'll hit Q again to make my selection. And I'll hit Control-Shift-I and I'll bring up my curves with Control M. I'm just gonna drag this up and brighten that section a little bit. So maybe the sun is slightly off the screen. I'll hit OK. And maybe it'll get a little more darker over here. A little deeper blue. Just come over here and paint a little on the corner. Because when you look at a sky, it usually isn't one solid color. There are variants in it. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this Clouds. And I'll bring up my brushes again with F5. And I'm going to take hard round brush and I'm going to lower the hardness to about 15%. And when you paint clouds, they're not pure white. You know, they do have some of that sky tone in them. And so you'll see me a lot of times before I start painting something, I'll sample off the sky and then adjust that color based off my selection. I'll just start painting some clouds. Clouds do have hard edges to them, but starting with something soft gives you a good starting place. And I'll sample this here. It's a little too white for me. And come over here. Or maybe there's another bigger cloud here. And as you go into the distance, be some smaller clouds. And again, this is just something as a starting place. So I'll sample off this blue here, and then I'll paint a stroke on top of the cloud and undo it and keep sampling until I get a color that I'm happy with, and that looks pretty good. Now, it was too blue before, and then just mixing the two lets you get that color you want a lot easier. And I'm going to come back into my brushes and take a brush for my eraser. Lower the hardness to about half and just go over this a little bit. Kind of sharpen up that edge. And it might not always look the way you want it at first. It can take you multiple tries to get something having the look that you want. There is quite a lot of experimentation when it comes to painting. Don't be afraid to try, because the nice thing about digital is it's very easy to undo what you've done and try something new. And I can just quickly flip my colors with X. So if I don't want to get rid of a color that I sampled, I can just flip to the other one. Just come back in, paint a little more, this time with a slightly harder brush. And the light's going to be on this side. So this edge over here is going to be a bit darker. And come in, sharpen up some of these. I'm just painting in nice light strokes. I'm not pressing very hard on my tablet at all because I do want that opacity to work for me. That's part of having the tablet, lets you have a lot of control over how things look. Just come in, set the color here. Take this, sample off there. And maybe I'm going to add a little bit of yellow in it. Just very slightly for the light of the sun. You know, sample that, undo it, and then paint again. And now I have a nice warm color for my clouds. Just add some nice highlights here. And I'm watching how the light comes into the scene. You know, I don't want to put highlights over here because it just won't look right. Just not going overboard with it, just having some nice bright spots where it would be. There we go, and that's okay for clouds to start. You know, this is just getting the initial color down. So I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm just going to call this land. And this is where I use that chalky brush most of the time, just because it works very well for landscapes. So I'll switch that, and then I'm going to sample off my sky, and I'm just going to darken it down. And this just helps me lay that initial color in. Now this helps set me up for the rest of the painting. And I'm just going to fill in. I'm not going to follow my sketch exactly. And, you know, something to note, when you do start filling in a sketch, it often looks very different because you suddenly have this solid object that you're looking at instead of just some lines on a blank screen. Fill it in, and then just, you know, I'm just trying to get the initial laying of things. And I'm going to sample this brighter color for this mountain that's farther back. And maybe sample again for these mountains over here. And those are a little too high, so I'm going to lower them. And just maybe have more of a ridge than multiple mountains. A little bit of a peak here. And after I get this initial color down, I can pretty much turn off my sketch until I need to reference it again. Because it can get a little bit distracting looking at it. As things get farther away, I do want to make them brighter, so I'm going to sample off the sky there, and then again do the thing where I paint and then select that color, undo, and then I can paint using that new color in the distance. There we go. And I'm not worrying about too much about color yet. I'm just filling in the initial things. But because I did sample off the sky, I do have a nice starting point for my colors. Because it can be a little bit daunting when you're starting with a blank canvas of how to set up your color palette. And I'm going to switch my eraser and switch to the chalky brush. And part of painting is, you know, you do sculpt a little bit with the eraser tool just to help you get that look that you want and help clean up your edges. And I realize now that I am painting on my cloud layer, and that's kind of a mistake I do quite a bit, and it's easy to do. You click off a layer and you continue painting on it when you think you've changed. There's a couple ways I can go about fixing this. I can just kind of make a selection and then fix what I painted over, or I can just continue painting on this one layer. You know, it's up to you how you want to go about it. For this, I'm just going to make a selection, and I'm going to dig into my land a little bit. There we go, and hit X. And I did lose a little bit of those clouds, but because they're already hidden, I'm not really losing a whole lot. And I'm going to hit Control V to bring it back. And I'm just going to place this about where it was. Just trying to line it up. There we go. And there's that. I'm going to come into my clouds and paint over them. There we go. And with this sampling off. So that is something to just kind of watch out for when you're painting, is watching your layers. Because it is very easy to accidentally paint over what you have. And depending on how many brush strokes you've used, you may not be able to undo it. And it's pretty much fixed now. There we go. I'm going to select a slightly darker color and go over the mountain again, because this is going to be closer to the foreground. And just, again, shaping it how I want. I'm going to turn off my sketch. And you can see when the sketch goes off, there's certainly just a lot less distraction with your painting. I want this nice big peak on here. And I can always reference my sketch again if I need to. I'm going to darken it again. And you notice I'm still using a blue color, but by desaturating it, it breaks it apart from the sky, and it looks a lot more like stone than it does the same blue color that I've been using. Again, just kind of shaping it, sampling off. And I'm finding that this is too much of just like a straight slope here, so I'm going to adjust this some. There we go. Now that is something to watch out for when you are painting landscapes, is the shape of what you're doing. I'll sample off and just kind of. And as I'm doing this, I'm holding shift, just kind of painting horizontally and sampling. So I go. This far mountain here. This is a little bit closer than the land going off into the distance. And you'll find as you're doing these that the initial color, getting the initial color palette down and laying all it down is probably one of the more challenging aspects of it. Just because you are setting everything up before you can really get into detailing. Then come in here, select a medium green color. And that's still a little bit too bright, so I'm going to bring it down. You know, I'm not worrying too much about highlights just yet, or the trees that are going to go there. And I'm just filling it in. You know, maybe there's some hills over here. Now I can blend these two colors. So things, as they get into the distance, they're picking up a lot more atmospheric perspective. They become a lot more blue. And as things get closer to the viewer, it's going to become darker and more saturated. Just a big brush here, quickly fill in what I want. Real quick, I'm going to bring up levels and just drag this left corner over, and I bring up levels with Control L just to help darken this down some. I find that I do have to do that multiple times when I paint off a blank canvas, just because things do get washed out very easily. Just come in here, and maybe think about how this land wraps onto the mountain. Select my rock color again, get some darker colors here. And just, very quick strokes. Just to kind of help set up the rock faces. You don't have to get too technical with it. Just, maybe there's a face over here. And as you put them together, just looks into one actual shape. It tricks the eye to thinking that, hey, there's a mountain here. Even if it's not totally detailed. Occasionally accidentally reset my colors. It's no big deal. Come on this side and fill in here. And these types of mountains, there is going to be quite a lot of rock as it gets into higher altitudes. And I'm going to come up here. I'm just going to sample off one of my clouds for the snow. And just little strokes. And once I get the snow down, I'm going to go back over with the rocks because there is usually quite a bit of rock showing through snow on mountains. And bring this more towards the blue spectrum. Now I do want these rocks to be a little bit more dark. Painting some rocky spots here. And I'm being very light with my brush strokes. I'm barely touching the tablet and then picking it up and placing it down again. And coming in with that color again. I'm going to sample the snow again and come over to this ridge over here. Kind of paint along. These two will kind of continue into each other. And then maybe this mountain over here just has a little bit, but isn't quite high enough to get as much snow. I'm going to select a brighter color for the highlights on this side of the mountain. Now maybe a little more towards the red spectrum. And rock usually does have a lot of variation in it. And maybe wrap over this way some. On big pieces of land, there usually isn't a very strong sudden light to dark. It does kind of gradually change. Select some brighter highlights. And at the bottom of the mountain, I'm going to define a bit the ground coming up onto it. As you get closer to the foot, there is going to be some foliage growing on it. It usually shifts from green to whatever color stone, and then as you get towards the peak, it becomes white with snow. So I'm just kind of painting how the ground might wrap onto the mountain. And the mountain is going to cast a shadow over on this side. So I'm going to make it a bit dark over here. I'm just going to use this color some more. And another easy way to add shadows is to take a hard round brush, lower the hardness, and take a nice dark blue color. Because shadows usually are in that range of very dark blue. And I'm going to lower the flow to about 20. Just very lightly paint in. To kind of help cast a shadow on the rest of the painting. I'm going to come in and start my lake. So I'm going to make a new layer and call this water. And I'll just use a round brush for this. Sample off my sky. Water is quite reflective, and it will pick up most of the sky color and any reflections off, say, a mountain or other structures, depending on the type of water or how choppy it is. I'll put my flow back to 100. And sometimes as you're painting, you'll find that you may want to make changes. To what you've done, just because it might not look the best when you actually start laying down color of what your initial sketch was. Come in. And maybe this will go off the edge of the painting. And I'm just going to clean up these edges a little. And quickly with the eraser. Looks okay for now. I can always do more to it later. Then I'm going to select this checkbox here, and what this basically means is that any paint that I add will stay contained to pixels that I've already painted. And this is just really helpful for staying inside of an object that you've done. So next I'm going to take my big round brush again, and I'm going to sample off the sky. And I do that quite a lot where I'll go to change the brush, but it's on another thing. So I still have the eraser selected. I'll switch back to brush. Sample off the sky, and I can bring that up with Alt. You see it turns into an eyedropper. And just kind of get some of that color change in there. I'm going to select my mountain here and just take that dark color and kind of fill in for where it's receiving shadow from the mountain. Water does get a bit dark when it's in shadow. You know, it does pick up light differently than other objects would. And I'll sample off here. And maybe take these clouds and just kind of very lightly put them in a reflection. And do the same with the mountain. I'm going to have trees along here, so maybe it's going to pick up a lot of that as well. And the water's looking just a tad too flat, so I'm going to create some ripples in the water. So I'm going to come and take a round brush, increase the spacing, lower the roundness, and add some scattering. So I have the scattering at about 400%, and the count to 2. And I will add some size jitter to it. Sample of my water. Just trying to find the right size for the ripples. Some bright highlights. And go to the yellow. And this will just be some sun reflecting on the water. And that works pretty well for the initial water. So I'm going to come back to my land, and I'm going to touch up some of what I've done here. Just fill in the side here. Again, if you want to paint a straight line, you just hold shift. So I can just kind of help set this into the distance. Next, I'm going to come in and do some of that foliage in the foreground. And that'll really help set some detail to what we're doing. Just going to sample off the green and darken it down a bit, make it greener, or move it towards the yellow spectrum. And I'm just going to come in, I'm going to, maybe paint some stalks just along the river here. There we go. And I'm going to come in and paint that tree. And it's going to be pretty dark because it is right against the foreground, and the leaves would be hiding a lot of the light. We kind of point towards the mountain. I'm going to come in, adjust the angle jitter, size jitter, turn on scattering, and adjust the spacing. I'm going to come down to color dynamics, and I have hue set to saturation to 5 and brightness to 3. And I'm just going to paint some leaves. Just kind of paint the top of this tree here. Now I'm okay with this space here because leaves aren't one solid object. It's going to come down, kind of have this against the mountain here. undo that. And just paint another branch going off into the tree. That works pretty well to start. But it does feel very empty at this point in time. So I'm going to come in and add some more foliage here. You know, maybe something a little bit closer here. Having different variations in color. And next I'm going to come over here to this land. Kind of add some highlights to it. It's looking very hazy at the moment. Just kind of sample off and get the color I'm looking for. Just kind of painting horizontally. There we are. Maybe take some of this darker color and add some shadows to the land. Now maybe there's a hill here and it's not picking up as much direct sunlight. I'm going to add a little bit of a shoreline to this. So it usually won't go from just, you know, green grass to straight to the water, especially with lakes. So I'm just trying to sample and get the color that I want. Kind of paint along here. Adjust it as I go. There we are. And I'm going to finish up this foliage here. I just having a bit here. And you'll see that I do jump around a lot when I paint. You know, jumping from one section to the next. Just, you know, very quickly implying that there is, you know, a lot of growth near the lake edge. You know, maybe this is some sort of stalks or cattails. I'm going to, again, angle this, add size jitter, scattering, and bump up the spacing and add color dynamics. I'm just going to save it this time. So maybe add a bush in here. No, a nice little bush. Right in the corner. And get some highlights. I'm going to bump up the spacing to do this. And when I paint these, I just move my hand in a very sporadic manner. You know, just to kind of help catch the chaotic nature of nightlife. Back to the land. And you know, work on this side of the mountain some more. It's looking a little flat. And maybe add some darker shadows on this side as well. Maybe shape this section here a little bit. Here we go. And that's looking pretty good for this first phase of the painting. So in the next tutorial, I'm going to finish detailing and take you through the rest of this to kind of bring it up to a finish. And hopefully that will give you kind of a bit of insight into kind of how you can start a painting and get through the initial phase of setting up color and just laying down what you want. So with this, I'm going to include the initial sketch file as well as this much done of the painting so that you can start from this point. You will need Photoshop for at least this portion because it is a PSD file, or at least a program that can read those type of files, because it will include all the layer information. That'll do it for this tutorial. Like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to stick around for the next one. As always, thanks for watching.